Hello everyone, my name is Carter Roos, and I'd like to take just a few minutes to share with you a presentation on the effects of overdevelopment on American farmland. Now, as a brief introduction, overdevelopment in America is the process that is rapidly changing the agricultural landscape of the country. It's a process which is replacing vast swaths of farmland with urbanized infrastructure, so housing, offices, things like that. This is important because it endangers our food supply. The danger on the food supply obviously places the economy in danger as well, and particularly there's an impact on all parts of the agricultural industry. So while it does impact the agricultural industry more so than other parts of maybe the economy as you might think of it, it does have an impact on food supply, which impacts all of us. It impacts everything. What exactly is overdevelopment? The American Farmland Trust, which is one of the primary sources combating urbanization and overdevelopment, says that overdevelopment refers to the excessive expansion of urban areas, infrastructure, and commercial development on land that was once used for farming, forests, or natural resources. So overdevelopment is the replacement of farmland, ranch land, forests, and other natural resources with these types of urbanized infrastructure that provide no natural resources. They don't provide food or habitat or anything like that. Rather, they provide housing, they provide office space, they provide manufacturing space, things like that. Another statistic the AFT cites is that the U.S. loses approximately 2,000 acres of farmland every day due to urbanization. It's from a study done in 2023. Now that's important because every day we lose 2,000 acres of farmland, and yet more and more people are born. So as the population rises, our capacity to produce food is also constantly lowering. That puts pressure on the agricultural systems to meet the needs of that growing population, which leads back to all of those effects we talked about previously. Now, one of the first consequences that we notice, obviously, is the conversion of fertile farmland into housing or industrial zones. More of a cause, maybe, than a consequence in reality. This is important because as cities and suburbs expand, farmland is sold or converted. That's how it's lost, which leads to decreased food production and greater reliance on imported goods. It makes us less capable to provide for our own communities. Overdevelopment also compromises local food systems, as urbanization often makes farming more expensive and less feasible for a number of people. So this can lead to an increased price in produce locally at first, of course, but as more and more farms go, as it gets harder and harder to farm, you can expect that prices will begin to rise on any type of farmed product, and ultimately all food starts with farming. So that you can expect the price on everything to be impacted by this. The economy will spiral if it's not brought under control. Now, smaller farms near urban centers often get the worst of this. They face rising land costs, and they often can't compete with large-scale industrial farming. Large-scale industrial farms have more space, they can do more business, they can operate at a higher volume, which allows them to operate at a lower margin and still remain profitable. Smaller local farms can't do that, especially as the price to expand or maintain their farms go up. They also face pressure from development companies who want to purchase their land to make it into more and more of these urbanized centers, and it becomes harder and harder as things get more expensive to say no to that money, or even to maintain the land you have. It becomes a lose-lose situation where farmers are forced to sell and retire or look into other industries. Overdevelopment also affects local ecosystems. It reduces biodiversity such as pollinators and beneficial insects that support farmers and also all aspects of our own lives. And the disruption of these natural habitats leads to a reduced agricultural productivity and an overall environmental harm that makes not only farming but also just the climate and everything less sustainable in the long run. There are also particular economic impacts on the agricultural industry caused by overdevelopment. For example, farmers are often pressured to sell their land, which diminishes the ability to continue farming and endangers the future of farming as an industry. Many farmers can't afford to expand or maintain their farms, which leads to their own personal financial instability. And as farmland is replaced by urban and industrial projects when these farmers are forced to sell, rural job opportunities are diminished. These farmers and ranchers provide a significant source of employment for a lot of rural areas. And urban projects just don't provide as many jobs in as little of an amount of space as farming and ranching do. So you can imagine a small farm which is converted into a single urban building, say an office building or apartment housing, might go from employing 10 or 15 farmhands, barn managers, to maybe a few receptionists and housekeeping. You go from employing 15, maybe 20 employees down to 10, 8, and so even half of the job opportunities that you were providing there previously are just gone. And remember that the population is still continuing to rise as this diminishes the job opportunities. Now, there are solutions to this problem. I'd like to talk about two in particular. The first one is smart growth. Smart growth is an urban planning and transportation theory that advocates for sustainable development practices. Now, that's a whole bunch of nonsense. So what that actually means is it's a way to think about and plan urban areas that allows for the growth of both housing and agriculture. So what this does is it prevents the unchecked sprawl of urban areas. It doesn't prevent urban growth as a whole, but it advocates for developing in a way that can not only support urbanization, but that can also keep the environment in check and provide opportunities for farmers to keep a significant amount of land and maintain their employment and their food production. So this mitigates the overdevelopment of farmland while still allowing for an increase in metropolitan areas. This is basically just a way to think about planning the areas we live in, planning the growth, to set space aside and save that for farming, while still being able to expand and support the housing needs of a growing population. The second solution is land preservation. This is similar in a lot of ways to smart growth. They use things like conservation easements and land use planning agreements to basically set aside land that is to be used for farming. And the difference between this and smart growth is that smart growth is just a way to plan out, we think this should be farmland and this should be urbanized land. What conservation easements and land use planning do is provide a legal backing to that. They say, a hard and fast stop, this land can never be used for anything except for farming. In the case of conservation easements, or in the case of land use planning, they'll usually say, this land will be farmland for 15 years, and then 15% of the land will be given up in order to be urbanized to provide for the growing population. So they protect farmland and ensure that it cannot be developed or utilized for other purposes in the case of an easement, or that it cannot be used for those purposes for a certain span of time or until a certain event in the case of these land use planning contracts. This is worse than a smart growth system because it doesn't allow for the same kind of modality that a smart growth system does. It doesn't allow for things to be adapted once they're set out. However, it's better because it ensures that land cannot be lost from the agricultural sphere without that plan. It protects everyone, farmers, local government, everyone, from the economic pressures forcing them to make a poor decision in terms of the agricultural. Now, there are also some policy initiatives that have been started that are basically government attempts to protect farmland and to recover farmland that has been lost. The largest one of these, the most significant that you'll hear about, is the 2018 Farm Bill. This included provisions for funding the purchase of conservation easements and establishing local zoning laws that help to protect farmland. Now, this is a figure that kind of lays out the spending of the 2018 Farm Bill, and it's going to show why we really need to be more invested in conservation and regeneration of farmland. So there's a lot going on here. These are the 5 and 10-year baseline spending. So this is how much money we're going to spend from 2019 to 2023. This is the first 5 years after the bill is implemented. And this is the change over here on the right in the next 5 years. Now, this big red part is nutrition. And this has nothing really to do with development or regeneration of farming. And as you can see, it's 76, climbing up to 76.5% of the spending. Commodities, again, nothing to do with conservation. Crop insurance does benefit farmers directly. However, it doesn't provide for creating or regenerating land to the farming industry. The part that actually accomplishes these goals that we're talking about being so important is this green sliver here that you can see goes from 6.8 to 6.9%. Now, almost 7% of what will become nearly $900 billion after 10 years is a lot of money. But compared to the money that's being spent on other areas here, we can see that it's not really providing the same impact that you would hope it would for how important the issue is. In conclusion, the loss of farmland to overdevelopment is a very pressing issue that threatens our food security and the viability of rural economies. The food security places the threat on the entire economy. It places pressure on us to be able to provide for ourselves. It increases the risk of the economy to instability, and it also forces us to be more reliant on imported goods. The loss of farmland also means that we're risking losing the ability to sustain ourselves and our communities. If you live in a rural area, there's a good chance that some of your produce, if you're buying from farmers or if you're going to local restaurants, is coming from farmers. It's being provided by people in the area locally, not flown from somewhere else in the country. And as these smaller farms begin to disappear because they can't keep pace with the economic pressures, we're losing that ability. It's also important for everyone to support smart growth strategies and conservation policies. As we saw in that graph in the Farm Bill, while there is pressure to support these things, it's not as widespread as it might be. It doesn't take center stage in a lot of ways. And while some policies have already been started, more legislation and planning is still required to secure the future of American farms. There's a good investment being placed on this by the government and by special interest groups. However, it's just not enough. As we can see right now by the AFT's figures, there's a significant amount of farmland still being lost and more every day.